The U.S. military's militarization of law enforcement by proxy, intervening in domestic affairs, is no longer exclusive to outside of the United States. The U.S. Department of Defense officially engages in partnerships with local, state, and federal law enforcement on U.S. soil as well. Now, this is the most recent iteration of the Department of Defense Directive 5240.01 as of September 27th, 2024. This directive has been around forever, since 1982, and every so often it's updated and revised. Once in 88, I think again in 95 or 96, then 2007, 2017, 2021, and then this most recent revision in 2024. Now, this directive sets forth procedures governing the activities that affect U.S. persons by the Department of Defense intelligence components and intelligence community on U.S. soil. Now, throughout all of these versions, and the main justification for U.S. military interventions on U.S. soil in general is based on President Reagan's Executive Order 12333, particularly Section 2.6, describing the U.S. military's, quote, assistance in law enforcement and other civil authorities, end quote. But also Section 2.7, which isn't mentioned in this slide, but it concerns the U.S. military and intelligence community contracting third parties to do intelligence gathering for them within the United States or for other goods and services as well. Quote, and need not reveal the sponsorship of such contracts or arrangements for authorized intelligence purposes, end quote. Now, before we get into this directive, just know that many people don't realize this, but Ronald Reagan's Executive Order 12333, that this directive is in accordance with, is what first started the shift of the military-industrial complex towards operating domestically. All quasi-U.S. military/U.S. government initiatives operating domestically cite their efforts as being in accordance with this particular Executive Order 12333. Not just this directive. Everything from this directive to NSA intelligence gathering to the various military collaborations with the Department of Justice over the years to Executive Order 13721 for establishing the Global Engagement Center, etc., etc., etc. Now, with that being said, what is the nature of this directive? Specifically regarding the intelligence relationship between the U.S. military and domestic U.S. departments and agencies? Well, first, this includes the U.S. military and intelligence community's partnership in counterintelligence, signals intelligence, geospatial intelligence, measurement and signatures intelligence, and human intelligence assets. So this isn't just partnering on intelligence gathering, but sharing intelligence agents as well. And according to this part of the directive, the U.S. military and intelligence community not only provides personnel to domestic U.S. departments and agencies in their domestic intelligence activities, but also, quote, specialized equipment, technical knowledge, or assistance of expert personnel, end quote. And as is the case with the Global Engagement Center, or GEC, this doesn't only include the Department of Defense providing this assistance for gathering information, but also disseminating information as well. This updated directive governing the intelligence activities of the Department of Defense and intelligence community when it affects U.S. persons has a couple significant changes from the past versions of this directive. This one gives new authority to the Secretary of Defense, a civilian position with authority second that only to the President of the United States. This new authority is, quote, assisting and responding with assets with potential for lethality, or any situations in which it is reasonably foreseeable that providing the requested assistance may involve the use of force that is likely to result in lethal force, including death or serious bodily injury. It may also include all support to civilian law enforcement in situations where a confrontation between civil law enforcement and civilian individuals or groups is reasonably anticipated, end quote. So now this 40-year-old directive, originally meant for governing intelligence activities and collaborations that affect U.S. persons, now permits the U.S. military to assist in lethal force on U.S. persons, on U.S. soil. quote, including death or serious bodily injury, end quote. As mentioned, this military assistance providing potentially lethal force on U.S. soil can be requested or simply deployed when anticipating a U.S. person or group may be confrontational with domestic civilian U.S. law enforcement officials. And this brings us to the second major change in this updated revision of this directive. All of the previous versions of this directive outlined very clear and very specific guidelines and scope regarding the targeting of U.S. persons if they turned out to be U.S. citizens. This one offers considerably less, ambiguously conflating U.S. citizens and non-U.S. citizens, just so long as whatever happens is on U.S. soil and whoever these U.S. persons are display a foreseeable threat and or lives are in danger. This is when the U.S. military can now intervene on U.S. soil with lethal force. Now, the Posse Comitatus Act, which we'll be discussing further later in this presentation, is the only safeguard preventing direct U.S. military intervention on U.S. soil. So, how can this new directive get away with permitting the U.S. military to use lethal force on U.S. persons and potential U.S. citizens on U.S. soil? Well, because the Posse Comitatus Act doesn't prohibit U.S. defense intelligence gathering on U.S. soil. Dissemination of information on U.S. soil by the DOS and DoD used to not be permitted either on U.S. soil until the repeal of the Smith-Mundt Act a decade ago. Also the only safeguard preventing that as well. But that's a side story altogether. So generally speaking, just so long as military interventions on U.S. soil affecting U.S. persons relate to defense intelligence and information, Posse Comitatus does not apply. And because of this, for some reason, this military permission to use lethal force on U.S. persons on U.S. soil was slipped into this intelligence directive, bypassing the Posse Comitatus safeguards altogether. And we see this change and new direction of this directive in the name itself as well, which leads us to the third major revision to this directive. All previous revisions of this directive, and even President Reagan's Executive Order 12333 itself, abide by Posse Comitatus as it is currently written and interpreted, with the scope specifically revolving around the U.S. Department of Defense and the intelligence community's intelligence-related activities that affect U.S. persons on U.S. soil. But if you look at the top right at the most recent revision to this directive, we see that it doesn't just include the governing of intelligence activities that affect U.S. persons, but also the, quote, defense intelligence component assistance to law enforcement agencies and other civil authorities, end quote. Domestic assistance on U.S. soil that, quote, may involve the use of force that is likely to result in lethal force or serious bodily injury. It also includes all support to civilian law enforcement officials in situations where a confrontation between civilian law enforcement and civilian individuals or groups is reasonably anticipated, end quote. Now, remember, this directive and executive order are regarding activities that affect U.S. persons on U.S. soil within the United States. But because these military interventions on U.S. soil are framed in a way as being conducted by the defense intelligence component, this lethal force of U.S. persons aspect tries to wiggle its way within the confines of Posse Comitatus. It's a red flag, to say the least. Lawful oversight functions come from Congress, the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense has its own oversight, ODNI, the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, and applicable offices of the Inspector General. And I think that these recent additions to this directive are in desperate need of oversight therefrom in an open setting. This order directing the militarization of law enforcement is just one of a few U.S. military/U.S. government collaborations on domestic matters regarding U.S. persons and or U.S. citizens that we'll be discussing within this presentation.